The views and comments expressed on the following radio program by its hosts and their guests do not necessarily reflect the views of rmconair.com or its affiliates. Listener discretion is advised.
Peace. Welcome to the Knowledge of Self radio show. I'm your host, Jerule Allah. Again, I got my brothers with me.
Peace, Jerule Allah.
Peace, Ture Allah.
Peace. So, indeed, on this 31st day, or Understanding Knowledge Day, first off, I want to say peace to anyone in the Lava Law Cipher who's out at Lamar Park because it's kind of raining outside. So, peace to y'all. Going on that note, God, I know you got some current events. You want to hit us with your rule?
Peace. Yeah, so a situation went down like around in January, beginning of January. It's fairly unknown by most of, the people in America. I thought it was relevant in this very serious situation. There was a actual murder or double murder that occurred in Joliet, Illinois. Two best friends, one named Eric Glover, Terrence Rankins, two black, young men. They were 22 years old. Were actually lured to, I guess, some people that they thought they were their friend's house, which were four Caucasians, and strangled to death. The ages of them were like from 19 to 24. So they were lured there, they were robbed, strangled, and even more than that, which to me was kind of gruesome, they actually, one of the girls had a fetish to actually have sex on top of the dead body.
That's foul.
Yeah, so, they proceeded to have sex on top of the dead bodies. Mm-hmm. Not only that, after that, they proceeded to try to dismember the bodies. Once they weren't successful in that, they continued the party and, continued to play video games and just hung out.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, this was all over mainstream news, right?
Yeah, everywhere. No, not at all. So it fairly went unknown. I just found out about it probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So it's kind of relevant to what we're going to be dealing with as it relates to the media and stuff like that. It's like the media really determines what's important to us. Now if this was in reverse, it was two white individuals who were strangled to death by 4 black individuals, it would have been national news.
Right. All over the news.
It would have probably been martial law or something going on. So
Christopher Donner all over the news.
Yeah. So it's just, I thought it was, something that we should be aware of, and I want to say peace to the families and peace to those brothers, and I think it's crazy. I really do. you know.
It's just kind of it's a statement about what's important in our culture, and peace goes to those families because just a loss, especially due to those circumstances, is a really painful and sort of a inconscionable loss, of life.
Right.
So thank you for that, Jerule.
Yeah.
Peace.
God, pardon me. Before
Yes,
you go on, I just want to take a moment to say the show is being sponsored by Global Position Solutions, and if you guys want to call in, the number is 1-323-965-1600.
And you're always welcome to call in.
Please do.
Okay? Please add on or any questions that may come up. Be good to pose it to the forum. To follow up the most recent news report about air pollution's link to autism came out of UCLA. And they found that in Los Angeles County, pregnant women who were exposed to about 12 to 15% pollution levels actually wound up having a child that was autistic. So now, as more research comes out, not only are vaccinations being attributed to autism, but also now pollution. So generally, these women live near freeways. Okay, so for those of you, if you have a choice as far as where you live during your pregnancy, this report that came out, and it's dated for March the 28th of this year, is basically saying that is an area where, pollutants that attribute to autism is extremely high and very probable.
Okay. Is it similar things that are in vaccines, like heavy metals and stuff like that, or?
They didn't really get into detail. I mean, in terms of carbon monoxide and things attributed to machinery, when it's inhaled, when you're exposed to it, it generally leads to respiratory problems. And we know that anytime there's a respiratory issue, especially if a woman is asthmatic, which pollutants do attribute to asthma, generally that's a different way of asphyxiation. So, limiting the amount of oxygen that enters into the body during the pregnancy. So it's pretty astonishing. As more information comes out, we're learning more and more about what's contributing to autism.
Right. So, maybe it'd be a good idea at that point to invest in some kind of air filtration system.
Right.
Definitely.
Right, because some women, they don't really have a choice, as far as whether or not they live near the freeway.
Right, yeah, and you can't necessarily just get up and, I'm pregnant, I'm a bounce.
Right. Right.
I'm go to my summer house, my pregnant house.
True indeed.
All right, so I know moving forward, God, you got some references you want to give to the people? Right,
so these are the references that we're drawing from today. Although we won't explicitly read anything from the Bible, we refer to Acts chapter 12 verse 4. Also, as far as our discussion about Easter is coming from history.com, we'll also be drawing from a documentary titled Centuries of Self, and a couple of good articles that you can find on foxbusiness.com and csmonitor.com, which is telling you a little bit about the retail projections for some of the holidays that we'll mention today. In addition to that, business.com and toyassociation.org, and finally, business.com. So these are all the references that we use to draw from for today's show about consumerism and Easter. So check those out either during the program or make a note of it for yourself.
Right. So, Jerule, I know you got some definitions that are very vital and important to the show.
Yeah, peace. So some of the definitions of things that we're going to be dealing with today, first and foremost, pagan, one of a people or community observing a polytheistic religion as ancient Romans and Greeks. Synonyms would be polytheist. Easter, an annual Christian festival in commemoration of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, observed on the first Sunday after the first full moon after the vernal equinox, as calculated according to the tables based in Western churches on the Gregorian calendar and Orthodox churches on the Julian calendar. Media, the means of communication as radio, television, newspaper, magazines that reach or influence, which is vital in consumerism, the concept that an early expanding consumption of goods and advantageous to the economy. Mm-hmm. So those are the definitions for today.
Cool, indeed. So, and moving on with the show, we want to kind of look at the origins of Easter and kind of where that comes from. So one of the references that we gave you guys was a reference in the Bible in Acts 12:4, and I'm not going to necessarily read it, but only just to point out in the New International Version, NIV version of the Bible, the word Easter is actually not in there.
Right. And I mean that's what we're building on today, because it is Easter Sunday, and a lot of what we practice in this culture is generally not grounded in what I would consider the truth, or what we would consider the truth. So Easter would be one of those holidays that we encourage all of you to check into and do your research. As a matter of fact, any holiday that you feel has something to do with your religion, it's very important that you look into where these types of holidays come from and what's the meaning behind them. Because what we're going to find, such as this bill today about Easter, is that Easter is not what some people may think it is. Okay, so just to take it from the top, when we're referring to Easter, okay, and we take it to the book of Acts, chapter 12, verse 4. That is the only mention of Easter in the Bible, but it's been mentioned by biblical scholars that that's actually an error in the earlier translations of the Bible. Right, so with that taken into consideration, we have to also look at the fact that Easter is actually supposed to be Passover, all right, as it is in the Bible. So let's go ahead and build a little bit about what Passover is, all right? Now, I'm specifically referring to how it's addressed in the Old Testament. So Passover basically was a period of time when the Israelites were held in bondage in Egypt, and when Musa, we call Moses Musa. So let me clean that up. So Moses, him advocating for the Israelites, time and time again asking the Pharaoh to let his people go. So finally, towards the end of these requests, a plague was sent out, and that plague was meant to kill all of the firstborn Egyptian males. So to prevent that from happening, Moses commanded the Israelites to sacrifice a lamb, and with that, take the lamb's blood and then put it on the door, so that when the plague or the Spirit of the Lord went over the city, it would know which houses were his people. Right. Okay. So as a result of that, when the Egyptians woke up, all of their firstborn males were dead, and then at that point, Pharaoh asked Moses to take his people out of Egypt. So it was considered the Passover. And that was an event that was supposed to be celebrated by every single generation, according to the Bible. Now, in saying that, it needs to be mentioned that the Jews, modern-day Jews, they generally celebrate Passover on April the 14th. It's called Nisan. All right, and then from that point forward, they'll begin to celebrate everything related to, their freedom in terms of the history, being free from the Israelites. And there are a lot of other things that they do within that time period. Now, are we following this?
No, indeed. No, I was going to ask, isn't there another holiday that they just got through celebrating, Satur, and pardon me for mispronouncing that.
Might be a curveball. I'm not familiar with what else they celebrate before that.
Okay.
But I do know that when we're talking about Christians and we're talking about Jews who practice Judaism, that's when we see a split. Okay, so Jews are not celebrating Easter, but Christians are celebrating Easter. Okay, and since the Bible was mixed, tampered, and diluted with, you have a different take on how this relates to the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, which is now where we're going to go.
Right, I was going to say that's the interesting thing. So, they celebrate Easter. So for the Christian, that represents the death and resurrection of Jesus.
Right.
The Son. Right. Which I think that's important that you say it like that. The Son, not S-O-N, but S-U-N.
S-U-N.
Puts a different spin on it, maybe a better perspective.
Mm-hmm. True indeed. So, you want to continue, or you want to continue after the break, or you want to?
Yeah, definitely. Let's go ahead and cut to a break, and then so once we come back from this break, we'll continue into this conversation and out onto the show. Peace.
Peace.
Are you a diabetic? Need some energy? Need to quench your thirst? Try Pitbull Sugar-Free Energy Drink, the only energy drink named suitable for diabetics by the American Diabetic Association. And it's now available with no calories, no carbs, no sugar, and no fat, and a smooth, natural blend of energy, vitamins, and minerals. Need to quench your thirst? Try Pitbull Sugar-Free Energy Drink, the only energy drink named suitable for diabetics by the American Diabetic Association. And it's now available with no calories, no carbs, no sugar, and no fat, and a smooth, natural blend of energy, vitamins, and minerals. Pitbull Sugar-Free Energy Drink is the healthiest, best-tasting energy drink around. For more information and online ordering with free shipping, please visit hiphopbev.com. Remember, Pitbull Sugar-Free Energy Drink, suitable for diabetics, great for everyone.
Peace. Welcome back to the Knowledge Itself radio show. I'm your host, Ture Allah.
Peace, Jerule Allah.
Peace, Ture Allah.
Peace. So before we cut to that break, we were getting into that conversation about Jesus and the Son and Easter not necessarily being, forget necessarily, Easter not being what it is as far as Christians celebrate it, but being more a representation of Passover.
Right. So now we have to talk about Easter and paganism, because some sources say that the origin of Easter is somewhat unknown, okay, but it's generally associated with a goddess by the name of Oyster. So to give you one particular spelling, and I really like to make sure I'm right and exact with the spelling of things.
That's that teacher in you.
Right. So one of the common names for this particular goddess that is associated with Easter is still pronounced Easter, but it's spelled E-O-S-T-R-E. And there are other names that are also related to the same goddess. Now, we have to go back to some of the traditions of ancient Babylon during Nimrod's time, okay? And Babylon, if I'm not mistaken, would be considered modern-day Iraq, okay? So there are other names that you can look up that are associated with this idea of Easter in terms of the symbolic meaning. Those being Astarte, Ostera, Semiramis, and then we get into Ashtaroth and Astareth. So you would be able to find at least two of those terms, Ashtaroth or Astareth, in the Bible. Okay, and during the biblical times, those were considered the gods of the Phoenicians, for example. So in saying that, when you say that you celebrate Easter, you're actually observing what would be considered a pagan holiday. Okay, so now we have to figure out how is this associated with Christianity, and how did it get mixed into what's known as Easter and the celebration or observance of Jesus Christ's death and resurrection. So, of course, that happened during Roman times, during the time of Constantine. So I wanted Jerule to sort of shed some light in terms of what role Constantine played in taking these pagan traditions and incorporating them into what we would consider modern Christianity as headed by the Roman Catholic Church.
Yeah, so peace.
Peace.
So when you look at Constantine, one of his major, one of his major things that he accomplished in his reign was to consolidate or bring Christianity to the forefront as the major dominant religion in Rome. In 325 AD, he called a council meeting in Nicaea, the Council of Nicaea, where basically it was for an individual by the name of Arius and his teachings. He was teaching the truth of the matter at the time. I'm not going to go too deep into what exactly he was teaching, but basically he was just saying that the way that they were practicing, this being the church, Christianity wasn't right and exact, and that it needed to be practiced more from a truth and rational standpoint.
That's a nice way of saying it.
Yeah, right. So, Arius, they basically put Arius on the hot seat and, asking him various different questions. He was on point in his answering the questions, but, they recognized that they couldn't allow him to teach this because this would take away from their power. So it was just basically, various different things that they covered. Easter was one thing that they did cover. Easter at that time, I think, was practiced on a Wednesday, if I'm correct. Constantine made it to be practiced or carried out on Sunday.
Now, how did that happen? It's kind of magical.
Yeah, that's my point. There was really no science, and it was just like, okay, well, we're going to make this change, and this is what it is, And
it's been that way since Constantine's time.
Right.
Well, I think that's and I can't remember the name of that Rascast song, but he goes into the song and he says he'll break down every day of the week. But then within that song, he talks about how Sunday is related to the sun, and so I think that's interesting how we have the celebration of Easter, which is the resurrection of Jesus, which is really the spring equinox.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that during this meeting, it was really the first time that they really tried hard to mix politics with religion. So they saw that, okay, we could use religion in political matters. So let's sit down and figure out how we can go about doing so, and really utilize it to control the people. Let's be honest.
Right.
So that's kind of like the first time that you see more of a collective effort as it relates to the church and government being connected, and they basically consolidated a lot of the so-called pagan practices, and they would actually not necessarily they would take from a lot of the pagan practices, and they wanted to bring those pagans into their fold, so they wouldn't necessarily say, okay, your way is wrong, but they would bring them in, and they might change it a little bit, but
put a spin on it.
Right. Yeah, so as you can see, Easter is an example of that. So
and to add on, one of the things that happened when Germans migrated to the United States in the 1700s was they brought this tradition of the Easter bunny and the Easter egg. So the story is that children were told that if they did well during the season that Easter is generally celebrated in, which is spring, because actually this is an observance of the coming of spring, considering the vernal equinox. Right. And the children were told that if they did well, then the Easter bunny or a rabbit would bring them gifts in the form of eggs. Now, in saying that, many of us grew up dyeing eggs and, having an Easter basket, and we were miseducated in terms of that, as far as it being truly what churches are saying it is. Okay. Another thing I wanted to tell our viewing audience is that each year, if you look at the calendar, you can go back as far as you like, but each year, Easter Sunday is different. It has a different date. So my brothers and I, we were building on the fact that when a man dies, right, in this respect, Jesus was murdered on a particular day according to the Bible or whatever text that some of you draw from. But when a person is murdered or dead, that day is pretty much set in stone. Okay, so it doesn't change every single year. Okay, which is where the confusion comes from in this culture, is that we're observing things that are not rooted in knowledge in this case. Okay, and that's attributed to a lack of understanding, which is why many of us, we practice these things in our culture that aren't right and exact. So that's pretty much, I think, our point about Easter. And it's really important that we all look into some of these traditions that we're being fed. You know.
Sure, indeed. And I think, actually, I want to hit you guys with a quote. And I don't have a name for the quote, but it was from an American news journalist. And basically he says, and this is in 1927, he says, "A change has come over democracy. It is called consumerism. The American citizen's first importance is no longer on citizen, but on consumerism." And I think that's a great lead-in into kind of what we're going to build about next, and even right. Easter, how, it's definitely become a thing of buy, right, versus whatever the true meaning was supposed to be
right.
of the holiday.
And, also the billions of dollars that are contributed to churches during this time. So, I mean, deceiving the people, and, it leads to a lot of change. Okay, and it's criminal, and many of us, we really don't look into it a little bit deeper. If someone were to tell you a story today, and then they said, okay, this is the truth, and I have it written, it's right here, okay? I want you to continue teaching this to every child in your family, right? Even though it's a lie, but what happens in this culture and just the world in general is that as these lies are passed down over a period of time, people begin to think that they are truth when really they're not. Okay, so that's one of the things we wanted to emphasize today, that a lie is a lie. Okay? It doesn't matter how many millions of people are out there subscribing to a specific belief. A lie is a lie.
Right.
Okay. So
and numbers don't change that.
Right. We don't change. And there's another thing, I think, if we have enough time.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
In terms of the calendars, it's important for us to look into the history of the calendars. Okay, beginning with Julius Caesar, because during Julius Caesar's time, which is around 46 BCE, somewhere within that time. He controlled or ran his country based on what's known as the Julian calendar, which is basically, it was named after him. That's why it's called the Julian calendar. There are still some churches that celebrate Easter based on the Julian calendar. Those are considered the Orthodox Christian churches. Whereas the Western Christian churches, they base their observance of Easter according to the Gregorian calendar, which was something that Pope Gregory put into play during his reign. Okay, now the thing about the calendars is that, well, first of all, you have Europeans dictating time, dictating, that's a major error. They're dictating time. Of course,
that pause.
Right. Our people taught them how to, use the solar system to determine a number of things, not only navigation, but days and times and things of this nature.
Right.
That was something not only that was given to them, but it was stolen from us as well. And they used it to do whatever they wanted to do. Now, the Julian calendar, the problem with that was that it had 445 days on the calendar, which is why under Pope Gregory, the calendar was changed. And as history speaks for itself, when Gregory made this decision, he declared that, of course, not only that Easter was going to be on a Sunday, but that there were going to be a certain number of days for each year. Okay, so the story is that, he declared like around October the 5th, that the date had to be changed, or October the 4th. So after October the 4th, according to his calendar, they had to begin the next day with October the 15th. So they basically missed out on 11 days.
Wow.
And they didn't get paid for that, too, did
No.
they? No
A lot
sick
of
day.
confusion.
Yeah. That's deep. That's deep. I know you had something to say about the whole April Fool's Day and
I don't want to really go too much into that. I just think, based on what you just built on, it's definitely a situation where we really need to understand the foundation of what it is that we do. If you understand the foundation of what you do, then the things that you do will make sense, and everything you do will be rooted in things that are actual, tangible situations. And that's, it's beneficial. If you're just practicing something because that's what you were taught to be right, but there's no truth in it, more than likely, it may not be the best thing for you.
Right.
right.
Now, I'm not saying Easter isn't, coming together with the family isn't a good thing, but why can't you do that like once a week? Or why can't you do that on another day? Why does it have to be when society says, okay, this is the day where you guys come together as a family,
Right. Letting them predict and control your culture.
Exactly. Exactly. So.
Indeed. So I think at that point we're going to go ahead and get into this next break here. So we'll catch you guys on the other side of the break. Peace.
Peace.
Peace. Welcome back to the Knowledge of Self radio show. I'm Jerule Allah.
Peace, Jerule Allah.
Peace, Ture Allah.
Indeed. So now we're going to just jump into the next part here. And that quote I mentioned had a lot to do with the next part and who we're going to be speaking of. And I'll let Jerule go ahead and take that subject.
Yeah, so peace. So we're going to get into media and mind control. You can't speak about media and mind control without mentioning what people call the father of propaganda or public relations. His name is Edward Bernays. He was born November 22nd, 1891 in Austria and moved from there to New York City, where he, grew up. The reason why he is named the father of propaganda is because he's one of the, most prominent individuals who use different tactics to get large groups of the population to do certain things.
Right. I want to say he was the first one credited with doing that.
Yeah, people were dealing with it prior to that. Some of his influences were actually Gustave Le Bon, and he basically read a book by him called The Crowd, and that just dealt with the study of the popular mind or collective consciousness. And another influence of his was Wilfred Trotter, and his book that he read was called The Instincts of the Herd, Peace and War. And Trotter thought that, or he argued that gregariousness was an instinct of people. And by gregariousness, that means pack mentality. So people, think more as like a collective consciousness. So,
Okay.
one thing to note is that Bernays, his uncle, was Sigmund Freud. So he actually learned a lot from Sigmund Freud, and Freud dealt with the unconscious mind being what dictates the conscious, or the animal mind being what dictates your consciousness. So Bernays took all these different things, and he put it together, and he basically realized that if he can affect the unconscious mind or the subconscious with a certain thought or a certain energy, then he can basically control large groups of people. So, some of the things that he did, one that stood out, or the first thing that was prominent to me was he worked with the President Woodrow Wilson.
Yeah.
And basically what he did with Woodrow Wilson was that he painted him as some superhero, at home and abroad. And
right.
When he went to a peace conference in Europe, the people were like, it's treating him like the Beatles or something. You know what I mean? Like, they were going crazy over him. So, Woodrow Wilson was shocked by it, and he was like, "Wow, if this works this great during war times, which it was dealing with the First World War, we should definitely utilize this in peace." So yeah,
Right.
Once he came back, he basically freelanced, and he was working with various different corporations. One of the first corporations that he worked with was Lucky Strike, which is a cigarette brand at the time.
Okay, right. I was going to say, because when he came back from the war, he was trying to figure out how to make money in peacetime.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
he actually is the reason, as far as I understand, why we have a whole thing called public relations.
Yeah. Well, public relations was just another name for propaganda. Propaganda, people hear that name and they get scared. Public relations seems like, oh, they're there to help me. So even that in itself is propaganda.
Right.
So he's real slick with it. But like I said,
It's that word magic.
Word magic, exactly. So once he came back, one of the things that he really utilized was the press release, which basically meant the media as a means to make people think a certain way. One of the most prominent things that he did was there was an Easter parade in 1929 in New York City. He hired some models and gave them packs of Lucky Strike,
Right.
and told them to light up the cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
What's important about this time is that most women weren't allowed to smoke in public at this time.
It was thought of a masculine thing.
Right, exactly. It was taboo for women to smoke in public.
Mm-hmm.
So what he did was, once they lit the cigarettes up, he said that these cigarettes, in the media, he had them say that these cigarettes were torches of freedom.
Right. Yeah, he told the media they were going to light the torches up and then
Right.
had them there taking pictures.
Right. So the cigarettes symbolized torches of freedom. So
Right,
that
that's
caught
deep.
on all over the country, and then women began smoking.
And how could you be against freedom?
Exactly.
You're an
Right.
American.
Right.
I'm about to light up right now. So that's one of the tactics that he used, was a press release. Another good one that important one that he used was called third-party agencies. There was a situation where he worked with a bacon company, and at that time people weren't really eating bacon that much, and they wanted to obviously increase their sales, so he used third-party agencies, and he either paid off or he was persuasive with a couple different physicians, and got them to say that big breakfasts were actually better for you.
Wow.
Yeah, so
So
The
that whole-
origin of all things.
Right.
So basically, from
That's
there,
funny.
these physicians, signed off on this paper. He sent the paper out to 5,000 other physicians. They all got on board, and that led to him also using the press release and saying that bacon and eggs was considered the big breakfast. And that's why people today are eating bacon and eggs every morning.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
The most important meal of the day,
Right.
right?
The most important meal of the day.
Right. So that's where that comes from. And I think one of the most prominent things that he utilized was fear. At that in around like the 1950s, 40s, and 50s, we all remember, in our history class, him talking about communism and people really being fearful of the so-called commies, right?
That's not scary anymore.
not anymore, but as we'll get into later, you'll see what took that place. He basically, one quote that I wanted to read from him that dealt with that was, he basically believed that we should not be easing the public's fear of communism, but rather promote that fear and play with it, play with the emotions of it.
Mm-hmm.
So use that fear to keep people in a certain state of mind and keep them under a certain, position of power.
Right.
Or lack thereof.
Lack thereof, right.
Right. And just listening to what the God is saying, it's interesting because most people have a tendency to put a lot of confidence in government and the decisions that they make. And just like he mentioned, that the core of the reason why we tend to support government out of ignorance is rooted in fear.
Right. Yeah.
How could I do it without the government?
Right.
Where would I be? No food, no nothing.
Yeah, so the government plays like the father role.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? People don't really ever grow up. So,
that's Uncle Sam, right?
Uncle Sam.
He does not know he's my uncle.
Yeah. So fear played a part in in 1954 when, if anyone's familiar with Chiquita Bananas, at that time they were called the United Fruit Company. And they are a very, very powerful multinational corporation. There was a president who came into power in around 1950. His name was Jacobo Arbenz Guzman. I butchered his name, but so he came into power around that time, and he was against the corporations having so much power in the country. At that time, they basically controlled the production of bananas, and it was a very lucrative situation.
I remember Chiquita Bananas.
Yeah.
The girl with the thing.
Oh, they're still around. Yeah, they're still around. So, so basically he came into power and he wanted to give the farmers and the smaller people their land back to make some money and make a living. Obviously, that's not a good thing for any corporation. So they hired Bernays. Bernays figured that, okay, well, people are already fearing the communists, so let's label Guzman a commie, right? And he wasn't a communist, so that led to...
of course he was, though. It was in the paper.
Right. Right. So,
that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, he used a press release again, and then, had, people fearing Guatemala. And, I don't want to get too long-winded with it, but basically the CIA went down there, trained a lot of the individuals who were in power prior to Guzman's reign, and trained them in military, different tactical military ways of doing things, and basically had them going to war with Guzman and his foundation as it relates to the government. Created chaos, and it actually led to like a 36-year war in Guatemala.
Wow.
Where it's estimated that 250,000 Guatemalans were killed during that time.
That's crazy.
So when you hear the term Banana Republic, this is where that comes from, because Chiquita Bananas was basically the one running the government at that time in Guatemala.
Wow.
So
Banana Republic.
Yeah, so that's a brief. He lived to Bernays. He lived to 1995, so he's affected various other different things, but those were a couple that stood out to me. So I would say if you guys want to learn more about him, definitely do your research. And he has a book called Propaganda where he goes into different, some of the science of how he applied a lot of the things that I was building on, and
I think one of the things that's interesting is him being cousins. Was it with?
Freud is actually his uncle.
His uncle.
Yeah, his uncle.
He does know who his uncle is. Huh?
Yeah. I wanted to read a quote from his daughter.
Okay.
I think it kind of sums up how he felt about people. This is from his daughter Anne, and it's taken from actually that documentary Century of Self. It said Bernays felt that the public's democratic judgment was not to be relied upon, and that the American public could very easily vote for the wrong man or want the wrong thing, so that they needed to be guided from above. So
that's interesting.
Right, and I was going to ask you, brothers, do you think that the public is stupid?
I would say no. The public is not stupid. They might have been made that way. You know what I mean? But which our degrees talk about. But I wouldn't say that they're stupid.
Right.
But I think that's the issue, is that he took it from a perspective more of, they are stupid. So instead of educating them and making them not stupid, let's just continue to keep them stupid, but to use that power for themselves.
I think, going back to the Nicene Council meeting, and you could see how religion was utilized. I would say religion was the first propaganda. And, them utilizing that to make people think that there's a higher power in control of things that they need to be in control of was a precursor to the mind state that people are in today. Now, media and the government and things of that nature kind of take that mystery God's role as dictating what we're supposed to think, how we're supposed to feel, what's important, things of that nature.
Right. That's what I was going to get into about the whole connection between him and Floyd.
Freud, Sigmund Freud, yeah.
Oh man. In any event, is that he dealt with things, or to him it seems like things always had a kind of sexual connotation to them, and so even with the whole cigarette thing, he used attractive women to pull that off.
Even the cigarette, he said, signified an actual penis type of thing.
Right.
Right, yeah, it was
Alex
a symbolic
exactly,
of man power.
So.
Right. I mean, I think just listening to your build, it's just it's not that the public is stupid. It's just they're not informed, and they're not being fed the right knowledge. And we're knowledge seekers, which is why we share what we feel is important on any given day that we come to share this with you. And again, we always ask people to look into any of the knowledge that comes out of the show and make your own conclusions. But most importantly, remember that the media is a tool to keep you blind.
Yeah, I think it's also important to mention that these tactics that Bernays were manifesting back then are actually still utilized today. When you think of the fear of communism and what took its place, you could look at the word terrorist or terrorism.
Yep.
Orange alert.
Orange alert, as well as dictators and things of that nature. So people hear these terms on the news and automatically they go into a state of fear. And then the government knows that and they say, okay, well, now we can go into this area, handle what we need to handle, and have the people behind us because they're already in a state of fear. So.
Right. And I can't remember the quote. I don't know if you got it, but basically that quote deals with saying that let there not be anything that happens that you don't use to your advantage.
Right.
And so I say that to say a lot of times, we start talking about things like this and people may get the impression that, the government is too strong and they're, all powerful and all wise, and it's not really like that.
Right. I mean, and that's the thing. Right.
It's not
I mean,
really like that.
we are not taught necessarily that the government is a small group of people. I mean, it's not the 293 something million people in the United States. It's a small body of people. They sit in a room and have a discussion just like us.
Right. Right.
And they can be questioned and they can be told that they are liars, which I am telling you some of them are, and that they should tell the truth about certain things and stop trying to make money off of people's ignorance,
True indeed. I think some of the other important things is, like we were talking about fear, manipulation, consumerism. Easter, what did it make? What were you saying? It was approximated to spend how much money?
This year it's approximately going to be $17.2 billion spent on Easter. Which is,
in a recession or a depression,
Right.
whatever it is, we still have enough money to spend on Easter, stuff like that. I think.
Right.
Go ahead.
Not to mention, there's said to be 180 million eggs will be purchased to be dyed.
I wonder how many of those are eaten.
Unbelievable.
So when you think, to me, when I look at this stuff, I'm like, well, what if people came together for one common cause like this that
With all
was
that
actually
money.
positive in helping out, us as a collective?
Right.
Like, we could get a lot done.
Right.
Yeah, true indeed. But that goes back to the whole fear thing and the government being in play and people kind of stepping back and saying, oh, well, the government will make my school better, or, the government will do this, make my health care better, whatever it is that you're letting that entity take over. And like you said, that's kind of dealing with like a mystery god.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And we definitely don't deal with that. You get up and do for yourself.
Right.
I mean, that's what my mother taught me way before any 5% teachers or anything. You hungry, boy? Get up and get something to eat.
Right.
Right. Right. That's real.
And that. So, how does this tie into to consumerism? That's,
Well, when you look at
gonna build
Bernays,
about that.
yeah, when you look at Bernays, he was big on that. He thought of very tricky ways to implement things in certain commercials or certain advertisements where somebody of status, like an actor, actress, things of that nature, would present a product or be using a product, and then people saying, "Oh, well, I want that product." So he was like the first. Like now all over you see athletes, Jordan with the Gatorade and his sneakers and all these types of different things. People are like, "Oh, well, if I get that Gatorade or if I get those shoes, then it's going to improve my game, or I'm going to be faster, be able to jump higher, and things of that nature." So
Yeah, you got to pump it up.
yeah, exactly. Right. So it's all. So he was kind of the first to present things in that fashion to cause people to buy things that they don't even necessarily need.
Right. I think that's important you mentioned that, because prior to that, Americans would really buy things based on necessity. And you know what I'm saying? All the advertising was based on that. Like, look at these shoes. Will last for 5 million tap dances or whatever.
Right.
And look at this car. You can give it to your grandchildren.
Right.
But they kind of realized that, hey, people are going to get to a point to where they're going to stop needing stuff.
Right.
So we have to make people buy stuff based on an emotion or a feeling versus what they actually need.
And what we have in our country is, if you don't buy certain things,
You're not cool.
You're not cool. You're left out, which is why they have something called a trend.
Right.
And there are also financial trends as well.
Is that a form of bullying?
Right. From major manufacturers, true.
Right.
It is a way of saying that the value of this object is more important than the person itself. So even in our culture, it's being pumped up how important money is as opposed to a companion or companionship.
So,
all right.
So a piece of paper is more important than procreating with. Wow. Okay.
Right.
That's interesting.
Right.
Not to mention that piece of paper is not backed by anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. They just print it up out of thin air, huh? Okay.
That's deep.
You wanted to build on some of the. Let's build on some of the bonuses for the last few holidays. We had mentioned that Easter was estimated to generate about $17.2 billion. What about Valentine's, Jerule?
Oh, you know what, God? Actually, I didn't really get to look into the whole Valentine's Day event. I know me personally, I don't necessarily strive to celebrate Valentine's Day on Valentine's. Yeah, I'm not into separating people who are in love and killing
indeed.
them. Yeah.
And
about 18.6 billion.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. I think that's interesting because that ties into that whole herd mentality, though. Mm-hmm. It's like, people are made feel bad if they didn't do anything for their significant other on this day, Your
significant other makes you feel bad sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. But you treat them the best 364 days out of the year, but they didn't get that box of chocolates. on that day. So, you know.
That's that emotion that we're talking about that Bernays was able to stimulate in people.
Exactly. So
I need this as a justification of your love for me.
Right.
But like, wait, 10 days prior to that, all those 10 days, I cooked for you, you didn't do anything, and now this one day, I don't want to buy you something, and now my love is questionable?
Right.
Damn the media.
Consumerism.
Yeah, so it's really definitely a play on emotion. You know, it makes you feel like you have to do something based on what the collective is doing. And if you don't, then you are a bad person.
Right. Which is interesting because going back to the whole Bernays thing, he kind of started that. And his thing was, you have to get people to dress based on their own expression of themselves. So now that although you maybe have people expressing themselves, now you're telling them how to express themselves
Right.
individually.
And we go back to trends again. You know, that's a really good example of trends. Like how does everyone see how this plays out in our communities in terms of original people? How do we find ourselves victim of consumerism? Like, in what ways does this play out in our lives?
Well, speaking about Jordans, I mean, you know, people are actually dying over a sneaker that probably cost, you know, $30 to make, maybe less than that.
Probably less than that.
You know, so I don't know if y'all have, you know, seen the riots and things in malls where people are fighting to get into the stores.
And the long lines of people sleeping over to buy some freaking
for some shoes. So it's obvious that there's something a little bit deeper going on than, you know, just the shoes being that good. Because, you know, I've worn Jordans and they're just a sneaker. You know, there's nothing magical
make
about
you jump high.
You know,
You didn't play better? Are you sure?
You know,
Score more points in that game, right?
There's no mystery there. So, you know, I would say that would be my answer to that. You know,
I think one important thing, you know, saying kind of as we begin to wrap up, is that the black dollar is very powerful in America. I think we're like the 7th spender in the world. Yeah, something like that. Don't exactly quote me on that, but it's something high like that. In any event, you know, we don't spend our money in our own neighborhoods. Like you said, we're running out, we're buying Jordans. I know we were going to build about the hair care products and how much money we're spending on that.
Jerule, how much did we spend on hair care products?
said that it was $500 billion. $500 billion.
Right.
So I'm sure that's more than the income of some small countries.
Yeah, that's powerful spending, political power, you know, all kind of power that you have behind that kind of dollar, and it's being misused. So, appropriately so though, because they're telling those people how to use it. Because again, those people don't understand knowledge, the foundation themselves.
And that's the thing that I think we need to really touch on and build on is that how you spend your money or how you live your life is coming from people that you've never even met. What you deem as important, what days you celebrate certain things is based specifically on what people you've never met have told you how to.
And those people think you're stupid.
Right.
Written in their own thing.
They think you're a herd.
That being said, closing up, one of the things we always hit you guys with a do, view, and a read. So the thing we want you to do is make your own Easter. By that I don't mean celebrate the resurrection of some dying white dude. I mean make some time to spend with your family. You know what I mean? That's not based on consumerism. Just do that yourself. As far as the view, we always hit you guys with documentaries and things like that. But there's a great movie called Equilibrium, which has Taye Diggs in it for all you women out there. And that's a great movie kind of dealing with what we were dealing with in the subject. And then the read, I think there's two things we wanted you to read was Propaganda by Bernays. And then there's also a book called The Spin that you guys should definitely check out. So other than that, if you brothers have anything else you want to...
No, that was it. Peace.
Add on about? All right, indeed. So peace. We'll catch you guys next Sunday. Enjoy your weekend.
Peace.